Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Nakib bin Osman, and today me and my groupmate Nazia Izora will be presenting on one of Robert Frost's poem, which is titled The Road Not Taken. But before we go into the reading or the analysis of the poem, I think it is appropriate for us to introduce to you about the historical context behind this poem and also the reason Robert Frost wrote this poem. Now, the poem was written in 1915, and it was actually originally titled as Two Roads in the early summer of 1915, but later Frost actually changed the title to The Road Not Taken. Now, in one of his interviews, Robert Frost actually mentioned that the poem is actually a form of jest or mockery towards his friend Edward Thomas. Now, Edward Thomas is a famous British poet, and they were very good friends. In one of Frost's visits to Edward Thomas, or in multiple of his visits, they would frequently go on walks. And during these multiple walks, Frost would notice that Thomas frequently regrets taking one road over the other when they are faced with two roads or at a fork. So because of this regret that Thomas frequently have over the road that he took and not the other road that they did not take, so Frost wrote this poem. Now, before we go into the analysis of the poem, I think I would like to ask you, the audience, to approach this poem as a blank canvas. Throw out all of your understanding of the poem beforehand, so that the interpretation or the analysis that we are about to do on this poem would make more sense. And with that, I would like to pass it to the next presenter, which is Zora, to read the poem.
The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverge in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveller long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, till where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really but the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first one for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverge in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. Despite its simplicity in lexical form, this famous poem by Robert Frost is more often than not being misinterpreted as hope, success, and defying the odds by choosing a path well, a path that is less traveled by. After reviewing this poem, it's pretty clear that it's quite the opposite of the connotation. What is depicted in the poem is the moral ethics of consequentialism, which is based on the outcome of the decisions that people make. The nature of consequentialism itself is quite flawed. The poem begins with a strong imagery of two physical paths in an autumn forest, a representation of dilemma in making choices. The yellow wood represents a new beginning, restarting our life again by making a decision. When the speaker sees the diverged road, he knew that he has reached a point in his life where he could only make one decision and sacrifice the other. And before making a choice, he is already feeling sorry and emotionally regretful, because we can't have everything in life. We gain something and we lose something. Line 3 to 5 is the speaker examining the opportunities presented to him between the choices and predicting the future outcomes. The speaker here is trying to make the most out of the possibilities before making a decision, and even then, what lies ahead remains unknown, as indicated by to where it bent in the undergrowth. Moving on to the second stanza, the speaker has already made a choice and walked the path that intrigues him the most with grassy and greenery ground. Even then, he thinks of the path that was not chosen instead of looking forward to what awaits him in his chosen path. This is an accurate representation of the tendency for human beings to consistently think of what ifs and could have beens of the other choices that we sacrifice. Satisfaction may have been acquired in the decisions that we make, but our curiosity of the other choice will always weigh on our minds.
Next, let's look at the third stanza, in which the narrator said that in both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. So you can see that these first two lines of the third stanza, it is a continuation of the feeling that the narrator felt in the stanza before. So basically he is feeling regretful, and that he concluded that both roads, that the one that he chose and the one that he did not choose, are both not traveled yet, because you can see in the second line of the third stanza, he said that no leaves had trodden black. So both roads have not yet been traveled. So if you look at the message literally, you can say that that is exactly what he was trying to say, that in the morning they were the first one to travel in the path. So the leaves have not yet oxidized to be turned black because of the steps or the footsteps of the people that have traveled there. But if you look at it closely and you try to interpret it, and then you could conclude that the word black, the color black, which usually people associate with evil, have not yet tainted both the paths. So if he were in a position to choose both paths, he would realize that both of the choices are not evil choices. So either one that he choose, that he could not possibly know that one choice is good or one choice is bad. Or it could be that both choices are good or both choices are bad. So he could not possibly know. So this is to sort of like elaborate on why this poem is a critique of consequentialism. And in the three lines below that, so in the third, fourth and fifth line of the stanza, you can see that the narrator was actually trying to convince himself that he could go back and try to change his choice if he were to face a non-favorable outcome from the route that he had chosen. He said that, oh, I saved the path, the other path, the one that he had not taken, for another day. But yet knowing how way leads on to way, that he doubted that he should ever come back after that. So knowing, at first he tried to convince himself that he should save the path for another day, but then he contradicts himself, that he realizes that's not how time works. So time moves forward and only forward. You cannot turn back time. For him to choose the other choice, if it turns out that the choice that he had already chosen turned out pretty bad. So next, let's look at the fourth stanza. Again, let's first look at the first two lines. He said that I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Now, once he had chosen the path that he had walked into, he looks into the future and then he contemplates, and he said, I shall be telling this with a sigh. So why a sigh? So the sigh could be interpreted that he was glad that he had chosen the path, but if we try to look at it consistently with the theme that is present throughout the whole poem, you can say that the narrator was feeling regretful that he chose that path. So we could say that when he was trying to tell the people that he had chosen that path, he was telling it with a sigh. So we can say that he is feeling regretful for it. So why is he feeling regretful? Because he doesn't know what lies in the other path. And then it is continued in the next few lines. Now, take note that these next few lines are considered as one of the most interpreted or one of the most quoted part of the poem. People usually quote this, and usually it is misquoted or misinterpreted by the people that talk about it. So the next few lines actually talks about how, when you look at it, it feels very dramatic. First, let's try to read it again. He said that two roads diverge in a wood, and I chose the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So it is quite dramatic the way he repeated the word I have chosen the word, I have chosen the route less traveled by. So you can say that, oh, he was feeling confident, or he was trying to make it dramatic that he had chosen one path over the other, and that has made all the difference. But if you look into it further, you can see that when he said that that has made all the difference, it is actually quite a neutral word, because he did not mention that the difference is a good one or a bad one. And he has no way to find out that the other route is better or worse than compared to the route that he had taken. So the repetition of the word I is because he was feeling regretful or he was doubtful that the choice that he had chosen is a good one or a bad one. The only thing that he is sure of is that it's made a difference. Really, there is no way of knowing whether the choice that we have made in the past is a good one or a bad one. So the conclusion of our whole presentation, I will go back to our thesis statement that says that the poem itself is actually a form of critique to consequentialism. So consequentialism lies its moral ethics or its moral philosophy based on the outcome. So if the outcome is favorable, then it would be considered as a moral choice, or it is considered as a good choice. So the poem actually forms a few arguments based on our analysis on why consequentialism is flawed. And those three arguments is written in this poem. The first one is human beings are not capable of knowing the outcome of an action before they make that action itself. So we don't have the capabilities to predict the future or accurately predict the future. We can still predict the future, but we would not know the outcome of our actions in the future, and we can only know based on what we have done. And the second one is that even if we know the outcome after doing the action, we don't really know the outcome of doing the other action. So you are presented with two choices. Once we have made that choice, when we have made one choice, then we know the outcome. You won't know the outcome of the other. And then the third argument presented in this poem is that it is human nature for us to try and convince ourselves that the actions that we have made in the past is actually the correct action. So we can say that we try to lie to ourselves, or we try to convince ourselves that our actions are moral, and because of that, it is like some sort of weakness, or there is a flaw in this poem. So to try and relate this argument with our poem, let's go back to the situation that I presented to you in the historical context or the introduction of this poem. I mentioned that the most common moral question or moral dilemma that is felt by people in Britain during World War I is that whether or not they should be joining the war or should they just run away from their country. So let's say that Edward Thomas, in this situation, he chose to go fight for the war. There are multiple possibilities, and one of which is he could die in the war, and the second one is that he could emerge victorious in the war, and he would ride on the glory of winning the war, fighting for his country. And let's say he chose the other path and he chose to flee from the war, where he went to America. So let's say in this situation, again, there are multiple possibilities of the outcome. He can go to America and live and not die in the war, or another possibility is that when on the way in the ship where he is trying to go to America to flee from the war, he could die in the ship because of a shipwreck. So if we contemplate on death for both situations, if he fight for the war, then he would die in the war. But if he flee to America from his country because he's trying to run away from the war, then he could die in the shipwreck. So in both situations, he could die. There is that possibility. So would you rather die in a war fighting for your country, or would you rather die on a ship? I would say as a death that is more glorious, or more that death is that is presented itself as more honor. I would definitely choose to die in a war in this situation. Now, before we end our presentation, I think one situation or one scene from the movie The Passenger that is acted by Chris Pratt. The movie came out in 2016. So I think in one of the scenes of this movie, we can relate it to the message that Robert Frost is trying to make in this poem based on our analysis. So in the movie, Chris Pratt was kind of feeling regretful because he chose to board the ship to go to another planet, and he was awake way before everyone else was awake, so he started to regret the choice that he had made. So he went to the bartender for wisdom, or robotic bartender, because he was the only one awake during this time, and he asked for some wisdom from him. At first, the bartender said, "You're not where you want to be," and Prospect just like shrugged it off mockingly and said, "Yeah, you said it," because it was pretty obvious that he is not in a place where he want to be, where he regrets his decisions. But then the bartender proceeds and say, "Let's say if you can snap your finger and be wherever you want to be, I bet that you would still feel the same way that you feel right now," because he was feeling full of regret. And then he went on and said, "You can't be so hung up on where you want to be that you forgot to make the most of where you are." And I think the wisdom behind these lines that the bartender mentioned presents the same message as the poem by Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. And I think that is all for our presentation. I hope that you get the message and you could benefit from our analysis of the poem. And with that, I conclude it with Wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And thank you.